Welcome everyone to the Sacred Hockey Mask. I am Peter and I'm joined, as always, by...
Lady Shasha, Mistress of the Snark, coming to you from sunny Orlando, Florida.
And this is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we've watched a horror movie and we talk about it. It really is that simple. And today, we're still working through some past vote winners from our Patreon, but we're looking at Bad Hair, which went straight to Hulu late last year, and is a film about... Well, it's about a killer weave that is also a killer weave. Like
Yes.
you know, so I'm trying to get fancy with the pun there, but like, yes, it's about hair that kills people. It's funny because last year me and Tim reviewed a movie called In Fabric, which was about a dress that killed people and was like either haunted or cursed or whatever. And it's just kind of funny that this is the hair version of that, and then in the not too distant future we'll be looking at a movie about killer jeans. So I don't know, it's funny. There's a bit of a trend this past year and a half of killer fashionable items or accessories. It's a weird subgenre, but for some reason it suddenly boomed. So here we are.
Oh, I should say it made a comeback because there were a few killer hair movies, but they were all out of Asia. There was one called The Wig, which is a Korean horror movie about a killer wig, and then there's two movies. One is called XT Hair Extensions, and another one's just called Hair Extensions, and they're both Japanese movies about killer hair extensions from like maybe 15 years ago. About
I can't say I'm surprised. Even in Japanese movies that don't focus on the hair, there's often an emphasis on the hair of the ghost or the curse or whatever. There's a scene in this particular that reminded me of John the Grudge on the ceiling, but we'll get into all that. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. This is a period piece. It's set in 1989, which is a very good year, might I add.
It's the year that we got Peter.
Yes. It's the year that I was unleashed into this world, and it was never the same again. But yeah, it's set in 1989, and it's focused on a character named Anna, who is a young black woman in the TV industry on a fictional channel, but it's kind of like a music channel. It's not quite as big as an MTV. I don't know if there's like an equivalent from the time period that this is kind of filling in for.
Yeah, it kind of was like a stand-in for a channel called BET that we have in America.
Okay.
That was they played music videos, and they were the first to play rap videos before MTV played the rap videos.
Because I wasn't sure, because this is obviously obviously at the time it felt like a lot of channels if you were used to just over the air, but obviously at the end of the 90s there was a boom in digital TV, so there was like 50 times the amount of channels. But so I wasn't sure how many other music channels there were back in 89.
In the 80s we only had three. We had MTV, we had BET, and VH1. It was those three, and that was it. And then in the 90s we got a channel called The Box where people could call in. It was like a only request channel. Like they only played videos that people called in and requested.
What's funny, it was the exact same here, just without BET. But when obviously I'm a bit younger, so there was three when I got access, and it was MTV, VH1, and The Box. That was the three that were available, and then digital happened. Then there was 20 or whatever it turned into. But yeah, so that's the setting of the movie, and it focuses. And this is from the person behind Dear White People, the writer and director of this. So you kind of have a sense going into it that it's going to be doing a lot of social commentary, a lot of ironic humor related to its themes, and a lot of it, with the hair particularly, is about the pressure to have straight hair, to fit in, to be TV presentable in the eyes of all these TV execs and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of the setup and the motivation and the world that we're inhabiting in the movie. But then, of course, when our main character Vanna goes and gets her weave, it turns out it might be cursed or some. I'll just say or something, because we'll get to spoilers later. And it maybe kills people.
A side note about BET. One of the main reasons why it became so popular, not aside from just playing the rap videos, Before rap, they played like R&B and funk and a lot of jazz music, all types of black genres. Because on MTV when it first started, the only black artist they would play was Michael Jackson, and there was a famous MTV interview with David Bowie, where David Bowie comes to the US and they interview him for MTV, and he literally asked them, "Hey, how come you don't play any black musicians?" And then, so if you get the chance, watch that David Bowie interview. It is iconic.
Yeah, I again, this is sort of before my time. A lot of this
Mhm.
stuff. I like. I remember being frustrated with the music channels when I was younger because when it was only the three of them, there really wasn't a lot of variety. Like VH1 was old music, that was basically
Mhm.
it shtick, and then MTV and the box were just kind of the same. I mean, all in the fact that the box was just nothing but music videos, and MTV
Mhm.
was like drifting to reality
Yep.
crap and whatever it does, whatever it does now. I don't know. MTV still exists apparently. I couldn't tell you much about it. I'm not hip. I don't even know
Mhm.
if the kids like MTV anymore, but
Yeah, I don't think they watch it because like they can watch any music video on YouTube. YouTube has pretty much eliminated
yeah, the need.
MTV.
Yeah, there's no need for it anymore, really. Um, so, but this gives you an idea of the setting that the movie's in. There's a lot of bright, colorful clothing.
Mhm.
It's got a very filmic look. It looks like it was shot in film, or at the very least, they've done a good job of emulating that in post.
Mhm.
I think I remembered that from the trailer. As soon as I saw the first couple of scenes, I was like, oh yeah, I think I remember noticing this in the trailer. It actually had the very film look to it. Which sticks out amongst movies that go straight to VOD these days. Most of them tend to have a very clean digital look that they all
Mhm.
have because they're all just shot in digital cameras now. So that stuck out to me. The movie looks good. I'll say that before I get into anything else. But before we go any further, it's time to just ask the simple question. Shasha, how did you feel about Bad Hair?
I thought it was good enough. I don't think it was like my one of my favorite movies. It was just I would give it like maybe a B minus or a C plus
Whoa,
for
whoa,
a
whoa,
movie.
whoa. We'll rate at the end.
Oh,
Don't
sorry.
break the format. I mean, admittedly, that's the wrong format, but still,
Mhm.
the ratings will come. I can.
I thought it was entertaining enough, but I think it wasn't it's meant to be a comedy horror, and I don't think it was that funny. I thought it could have been funnier.
Yeah, I this is a weird one for me because I really liked probably the first half or so,
Mhm.
and then once it started going into more of the horror stuff, I think the more it fell apart for me because ultimately it became a lot of CG. I don't know
Mhm.
if the actual horror kills and things like that were actually because there was a lot of weird editing going on, and I really felt like Justin Simeon who made this there, he is a very good writer. He's a very good director of characters and drama and the comedy as well, right? And
Mhm.
that was evident on Dear White People, and I got flavors of that in the first half of this. I thought it did a really good job of just introducing us to the characters, the world they were in, their interactions. I was kind of just into the characters and what they were doing and what our main character Ivana was going through.
Mhm.
It was once it started delving more into the actual supernatural horror stuff, is the more it kind of lost me, and the more I was getting kind of bored. But just, because the last like 10, 15 minutes are just like a lot of like running away from hair and stuff, and it's just kind of
I
dull. I guess a bit
I
silly and
have to
dull.
I have to agree with you with that, especially since Justin Simeon said that he was very inspired by Japanese horror, but he didn't capture any of the eeriness of Japanese horror.
No, no. I mean, he did make me hate hair a little bit in this. Every time it did a close up, or you heard like the harsh sound of brushing
Mhm.
hair, or I was like, "Oh, stop it! Hair!
Mhm.
What are you doing? You're freaking me out here, movie." Um. So yeah, it's a shame because I actually was really into it for a while, and then it kind of started to. And I guess it makes sense that this is the element that the creator is unproven and was the horror. Like I knew going in, he was going to do fine with the characters and the drama, but once it went into other stuff, it kind of fell. I don't want to say fell apart. That sounds a little bit harsh, but
Mhm.
certainly there was a couple of funny beats for me, but yeah, there may be a bit fewer and further between than
Mhm.
perhaps I would have liked. I'll point out one or two of them when we get to spoilers, but um. Yeah. What did you think of the cast?
I like the cast. I thought, well, the main actress, she was beautiful. For one thing, she just had this bone structure that you just can't stop looking at her. and I also like the cameos from Kelly Rowland, who is playing a character that's basically a mixture of Janet Jackson and Karen White. Like the dance was very Janet Jackson. The hair, also the haircut, is a very Janet Jackson haircut that she had, and then Usher was there as well as the. He had such a small role. He was just like the video guy.
I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't have ever recognized Usher, but I did
Hmm.
recognize Kelly Rowland.
Hmm.
But the sad truth is I recognize her from Freddie V's Jason rather than her career as a musician.
Oh, and that's interesting because I've always read that she has a much bigger career in Europe than in the United States,
I mean, I'm just not a
or more
music.
popularity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just not a big music follower. Like, if it's
Mm.
not in my specific avenue, I probably don't like I don't know any, like, say, Taylor Swift songs, right? Anything in the
Hmm.
mainstream pop culture or whatever. Yeah. But um, like, the only reason why I know Kelly Rowland's name is because of Freddie vs. Jason. Like, everyone knows who
Hmm.
Beyonce is because Beyonce kind of became the one that broke out and did her own
Hmm.
thing. But the only reason why I know Kelly Rowland is because of Freddie vs. Jason. I have no idea who the third member of Destiny's Child was.
Oh, they actually changed members. There's a whole controversy
Oh,
about
really?
that
Okay.
where when the Say My Name video came out, there was two totally different girls in the video than the two girls that sang on the album and were original members of the band. And it was like a whole lawsuit because the manager of the band swapped out the girls without telling the label that he swapped out the girls. So,
That's a little ironic in a song called "Say My Name," to be honest. But
yeah.
but hey, life deals you the hand you get. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think the cast are very, it's a very big cast for, and obviously not all the roles are that big. Lena Waithe's roles was
Mhm.
surprisingly small, I thought, given like her more recognizable name. Um,
Did she executive produce it? I think
she
I
did, yeah. So
okay, that's what I
that that may have been a case where it was like she was more of a producer and just gave herself a small role rather than wanting to
Mhm.
be like, a big part of it. But I was expecting more of her. Um, there was a few faces I was recognizing from Dear White People, sort of sprinkled throughout.
Mhm.
Um, in very small roles in some case, like the cousin's boyfriend, for example,
Mhm.
was on Dear White People, and like it was that thing where the first shot I didn't quite it wasn't until I spoke that I went, oh wait a minute, that's the nerdy dude from Dear White People, and so there was a few actors that sprinkled through. Um, I think her auntie I recognized from Picard. She was in season one of that just last year or so. A lot of faces. There was a lot of faces popping up here or there that were sticking out. Um, but no, I think if there's one thing I won't fault on this, it is the cast and it is the direction. At least in terms of the non horror stuff, like when it's just characters and the way it handles like the nervous tension and unease and social awkwardness that Anna's going through, or like, oh god, someone's going to say something and point this out, or someone's going to be awful, and like the influences around her when she's like auditioning at the
Mhm.
start for some other TV network, uh, and they've basically just sort of decided they're not giving her the part the second she's walked in. Uh,
Mhm.
just little moments like that where those are all really well handled, and it makes sense because this is all the sort of stuff. It's poking at uh these racially charged situations that Dear White People, of course, was entirely
Mhm.
about and was all about sort of deconstructing all that. And this
Es
movie, when it's doing that, is very good.
Yeah, especially in the United States, that scene, when she's walking through the hallway from that interview and she sees all the girls lined up, which are pretty much different variations on the same type.
Yeah, they're
And
all like her. They're all black women with the hair, the similar hair. Like they're all.
but the thing is, they're not like her in that there's a subtext about colorism in American movies. A lot of times, producers, older producers, like people that they're in their 60s and 70s and they're set in their ways. They want more of the Zendaya type than the Kelly Rowland type, and that's like
Mm,
strictly a colorism thing, and they call it having a more international look. And like like you just said, you didn't see the difference in those women, so they're making up differences that sometimes people outside the US don't even see the difference. They see a pretty black woman's a pretty black woman, but in the US they only want sometimes they only want a certain type of pretty black woman. She has to have a certain hair texture and skin tone, and it did that also with white women. There was a time period through the 80s where blonde was just it. And if you had dark hair, it's harder for you to get on. And if you had red hair, you just weren't getting on unless you were a comedian.
Gingers are only allowed to be funny,
Yeah.
and nothing else. Which is actually really funny because the whole redhead thing's kind of a thing now. Like people
Yeah. Oh,
love the
now it's like
redheads now.
pop it. Now you have people dyeing their hair red.
Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't really even consider the different skin tones when she was walking. I saw that as more of a sort of like sad irony where she was walking past all these other women, knowing that they didn't stand a chance. Right, is kind of how I read that moment. The subject though did come up more overtly later when Vanessa Williams' character, who's now the new manager of the TV studio or TV station, there's a couple of lines of dialogue that sort of made that clear, and I think one of the interesting things about watching movies and shows like this, being a little bit separate from that culture and being away from the US and not necessarily knowing all this stuff just by hand, is how it gets some of it across and how the context kind of reveals these things as I'm watching it, and it's kind of there's a sort of educational side that kind of sprinkles out of it. So that's interesting because you're right, because that came before the subject was brought up more directly later in the movie. So that's an interesting different read on that, and I assume there's probably a few different because even at the start, because it opens with a flashback when Anna's a kid, so it's like I don't know, 70s probably, and I thought they were using hair dye at first, because she's got like stuff in her hair. I don't remember what it was called, but it was clearly something.
It was.
Yeah, oh, you'll know. Yeah, there you go.
It was a relaxer. It's a product that's used to chemically straighten your hair. And if you don't do it right, you can get chemical burns. You can have your hair fall out, like what happened to her. Her sister, who was also a child, trying to do this, didn't do it properly because you really should have that done in a salon if you're going to do it. I don't suggest people do it because it is they've proven that the toxins actually seep into your brain. So it's not,
oh, geez.
it's not healthy to do, but some people still do it.
Yeah, that's obviously traumatized. This is kind of her fear of having her hair touched for the rest of her life. So it's all very, and all the close-ups make it really nasty and like, ugh.
And it has a very strong smell, like a very acidic smell too.
Oh, I'll bet. As someone who hates the smell of like nail varnish and nail varnish remover, like I can only imagine what this stuff, because it's all over your hair, is going to smell like.
And I could directly relate to that scene because I had that same thing done to my hair when I was 10 years old, and the same thing happened. My hair literally started coming off down into the sink, like it fell right out. And my mother just had to cut it down short to like a boy's haircut, and it just grew back. And of course, now I have a lot of hair, but don't put chemicals in kids' hair.
It's not a good idea. Yeah, that was just kind of that interesting scene where I didn't immediately get the context, and I think they're cousins, not sisters, because I thought they were sisters at first as well, until later when she kept referring to her parents as her auntie and uncle. So I think they were
cousins. Yeah.
I don't know if they ever got to explained exactly, like, because we never see her parents, or
I don't think they do say what happened to her parents.
So I'm not sure, but clearly, it seems like she might even have just lived with them permanently, and it wasn't just like a visit. So, which maybe gives a bit more motivation. Like she's got this dream of being important, being on camera, having a voice. That's her dream, and that's kind of like why she's working at this business and why she wants to do this. And of course, the constant challenge of you're not being accepted for who you are. You're being told you need to change your hair. Even Vanessa Williams, who's her new boss, is like, hey, you're never going to get very far with that hair. You're going to have to go get a weave, and she recommends the place, which is where she goes, and that's where the movie kind of sprawls from there. Yeah, it's a very. I think the sad part about the horror stuff not working is that I actually really like the build to it because it has a really unique kind of tone because of. I think partly because of the time period, because of the setting, because of the way it's mixing the real sort of social issues and social horror, if you want to call it that, with actual horror is very interesting because you have all this idea of like her giving in is kind of like giving into this monster, and she's adding to the monster that's ever growing because the more people who give in to the idea that this is the image that you have to have, is the more it kind of perpetuates that is the image that is what's going to lead to success, kind of thing. So that stuff is you know, it's like the actual metaphor and the that side of it is quite smart. It's just not that good as a horror movie to watch once the horror stuff actually gets going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a shame. I think the trailer when I saw it gave me the vibe that the horror scenes were going to be treated more comedically, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I got that from the movie. I felt like the tone was a little bit hard to
Yeah.
gauge once it actually got to the hair's killing people stuff. So you know that's a bit of a shame, but I certainly wouldn't say don't watch it though. I think there's enough interesting elements and enough just strong character writing that it is worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say keep your expectations just a little
I,
bit reserved.
I did not make a note of what it was rated, but it felt like PG or PG-13.
They were dropping a lot of f bombs, so I think it would have
Oh,
been.
okay.
I think it would
Mm,
have been R-rated. It's saying 15 for me, but that's because that's the UK rating. Hold on,
mm.
let me. Does it tell me? It's unrated, which makes sense because it never got released in theaters.
Yeah.
So
So if it didn't get released in theaters, it probably is a TV 14 here.
no, it's listed as unrated. Like
Oh.
they don't have to rate things that go on streaming
Mm,
services. So some of them still do it because they want to play nice with the MPAA, but they don't
mm-hmm.
have to. Whereas in the UK, it's actually illegal to release anything anywhere without a rating.
Mm-hmm.
so so we still get unrated cuts, but they're just not called
Mm-hmm.
that because the name doesn't make sense because they are rated. They're submitted separately as a director's cut or an extended cut or whatever. But
Yeah, I remember in the UK had the video nasties list. I'm still making my way through that.
oh, geez, that's a
Yeah.
whole other. That do you know what the sad part of the video nasties is that it became this list of like horror fans. Oh, we have to see all the video nasties. The
Mm-hmm.
sad truth is that other than Evil Dead and like maybe 2 or 3 other movies, most of them suck. Most of them are terrible movies that didn't deserve to be banned per se, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely didn't. But because they're on that list, they've got this mystique, this aura around them. Oh, they were banned for years.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them still are actually. I think there's a couple
Oh,
of really.
wow.
I think there's a couple of like really extreme ones because as this is the funny thing, censorship was really bad in the 80s in the UK, but over
Mm-hmm.
by the time you get to the mid 2000s, like it had completely loosened up, and it's actually there's movies that are R-rated in the US now that get a 12 here, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, clearly this is flipped, and now the UK is the lenient one and doesn't really give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like it's very rare now you even get an 18 because we have 12s, 15s, and 18s as kind of the main kind of above PG
Mm-hmm.
levels. And I feel like only the most extreme things get 18s now. Like most R-rated movies are 15s here. So, uh, anyway, that's a tangent. That's not necessarily related to this movie per se.
Well, yeah, it's true because Poltergeist was a PG or possibly PG-13. I think it might have been the movie that created the PG-13 label because before 82 it was either PG, or X. And so PG-13 might have been created because of Poltergeist, whereas The Conjuring is rated R,
Yeah.
even though
Uh,
it's like,
I don't think it was created for Poltergeist, and the reason why because I'm pretty sure it was Temple of Doom. I'm
oh, it
pretty
might have been.
I'm pretty
I
sure
knew
it
it
was
was a movie from the 80s.
yeah, and Spielberg related as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was Temple of Doom, because that movie is darker than the first one, and I think that they had to like, hey, like this, like we don't want to be R-rated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's too extreme for a PG. Can we have something in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. I don't want to like. I have a vague recollection that it was Temple of Doom, but yeah, maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
Poltergeist. I can't remember.
Oh, they'll
Uh,
let us know in the comments.
oh, I'm sure they
This
will.
audience is smart.
They'll. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that, but they if there's one thing I know about YouTube comments, they love to correct when
Mm.
when something wrong is said.
Yes.
I have faith in that. So yeah, I guess we can go to spoilers. I suppose. I don't know if there's much more I would like to say. I will say I like how the movie looks. I think the look drew me in immediately. Performances, writing, and directing are all good, and that sounds like a recipe for a great movie.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, like I say, it's the actual horror stuff that kind of and there's some plot. I don't want to say twists, but there's some plot directions in the back half that I thought kind of diluted what the movie was a little bit for me in terms of the core premise, which is a shame. Uh, So, yeah. Also, shout out random small role for Vanderbeek, Dawson.
Yeah, James
he,
Vanderbeek.
he,
Yeah,
he, he just out of nowhere he's there like in the first 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh hello, okay, I
I
guess you're in
remember I was
this.
watching. I was like, "Is that Dawson?"
All right, okay. Wasn't expecting you in this, but fair enough. um, so there we go. All right, so I'll give a spoiler warning. Full spoilers for Bad Hair from this point on. Uh, so yeah, we kind of talked about the start. There's flashback. There's the the interview, and then of course when they find out that their current studio head, their TV network head, is leaving. She is retiring from the role, and she's going to go and start her own thing elsewhere. Although it quickly becomes apparent that this is more. She kind of refused to stay there because they wanted to make it more mass market friendly, and she feels like it's moving away from like the core ideas of what it's called culture, the channel, of
Hmm.
what that was supposed to be. Now they want a broad audience, which there's a great line later from one of the characters where uh, she's supposed to say wider audience, but she says whiter audience, and then
Hmm.
corrects herself, and it's just kind of like, okay, like they want this to appeal to everyone now, and it's kind of losing its identity a little bit. Uh, and it kind of this idea where this woman, I think her name is Edna, who's leaving, says, "Look, I'm going to go and start a new thing. There might be jobs for everyone once I've got that set up." And
Hmm.
it's all kind of about how they're all seduced into following this new plan and this new direction away from her. So by the time that Edna does call and say, "Hey, I've got a new thing set up, come and work for me," they're all too invested in this new, in Vanessa Williams' new take on this TV network.
Hmm.
And obviously Anna's one of the first ones to fall. But it's when she's promised of like being able to produce maybe her own TV show, because she's up until now she's been an assistant. She's not actually had like an important role, even though she's been there for years. To the point
Hmm.
where her family all kind of like make fun of her and look down on her a bit for like dreaming for something that she's never going to get. Like, we all have real jobs, even though even even though her uncle is like a creepy myth expert, which by most
Hmm.
people's standards, most people would look at that and go, and don't get me wrong, he's like a professor who like studies it properly and stuff, but it's just kind of funny to me that a character who spends time talking about, ghosts and legends
Hmm.
and myths is looking down at someone who's got an actual job at a TV studio because they might
Yeah.
actually rise up the ranks and get like their own TV show at some point. I'm like, I don't know, that seems fairly plausible. She's already working there. It's not,
Hmm.
I don't know. But he,
It kind of reminded me of how people look at YouTube.
oh sure, yeah.
They don't, they really think we're not working.
You, you,
It's work.
yeah, you don't have to tell me that twice, Jesus.
Hmm.
People have this look in their face like, yeah, but what do you do though? like, thanks. Um, yeah, he has a really intense scene actually, where because she, kind of like, why are we all talking about all this ghost nonsense? Because I think the cousin's boyfriend sort of looking at the book that he'd been handed at dinner, and he's kind of like looking at the myths, and because she has one line where she kind of says, this is kind of silly. Her uncle gets like so serious and has this really intense scene where he's talking about how important all these myths are and get into all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, give her a break. She has had one small line, right? She's felt ignored, and no one's taking her job seriously. No one's taking her seriously. She's it stuck out to me. Now, to be fair, he apologizes like 2 scenes later. He's nice about it. Uh,
Hmm.
but it does give you this, like, the whole image is painting this very lonely existence that she kind of has, where she has friends at work, but she does feel very kind of alone. She does feel she's got this tiny apartment that she can barely afford. In fact, we find out that our landlord's extorting her later on, but
Hmm.
uh, she can't make her rent. There's all this stuff going on. Um, and all of it's kind of pointing to the desperation, the idea that she's eventually going to give in and go and get this hair weave done because everything in the world is telling her that she has to change. Everything's telling her that she's stuck in this rut, and she gives in and goes and does it. Um, and that's obviously where the movie turns this point, because that's where the creepy. But I do like though that for a long time, it's quite a while because it's not until the landlord tries to rape her. Which yes, that's a really dark sentence to just throw out there like that. But it's not until then, and it sort of acts in self defense where you're sort of like, maybe it's not evil here. Maybe it's just to protect her. Like you could have argued that, but up until that point, it's all just like little things. It's all just like her. In fact, one of the moments that made me laugh is when she gets her weave done, and her head kind of hurts. Like she's told that her head's going to hurt for a little while. That's normal the first time you have this done. She goes into work the next day, and like we see an example, and this is good filmmaking. Where earlier on in the film, we see her walk into the lobby, and everyone kind of gives her different looks, or ignores her, or bumps into her, and makes little comments and things like that. But this time, she walks in, and like people are smiling at her, they're treating her so differently. But the moment that made me laugh in this scene is the receptionist in the lobby kind of like looks at her, like sort of flicks her hair back and winks at her. It's overly cheesy. And then in return, Anna tries to flick her hair back, but when she does it, she goes, ow! And it hurts her to flick her hair back. That made me laugh. I thought that was a really funny little moment.
I think one of the most effective scenes was when she was getting the hair weave done. Because I don't know if you've ever experienced having your hair braided too tight. It really and truly does hurt. I remember.
I don't know if you're looking at my head right now.
Well, hey, I don't know. Sometimes guys go through that phase where they want cornrows, and that's including I've seen white guys with cornrows.
I mean, I have seen it. I mean, admittedly, in Scotland, it was just that one kid. It was that one kid in school who took a notion over the summer to do something a little different. You're like, okay, all right.
But I've had that done before. Not a full. I never had a full head weave, but I've had tracks put in the back where they'll braid like the back of your head 2 braids, and then they sew the weave hair onto the braid, and it was so tight. I literally had to take Advil when I got home.
Oh, geez.
It can be very painful. It shouldn't be. I'm told now that that's not the proper way to do it, and that it should not be that painful. But some people, pick your hairstylist. Like there's good and bad barbers, good and bad hairstylists.
Yeah, damn. I mean, typically, as much as this movie makes it seem like the most excruciating thing ever, I actually really like someone like playing with my hair. It's actually a really pleasant experience. Typically, obviously, I imagine it being pulled tight. It's obviously a very different story, but it's just funny that this movie makes like anytime anyone touches her hair, she's like, ugh, and she's like almost crying. She can't handle it. She's got like a phobia of having her hair touched, because of that experience as a kid. So that stuff's really.
And also, did you notice in the hair we've seen, like I said, that the hair is supposed to be sewn to the braid. In that scene, you can see the needle going through her scalp.
Yes.
It's not supposed to go through your scalp. That's why it was even more horrific. Like you're not supposed to sew it to your skin.
Yeah, that did strike me as a bit odd. That felt a bit like a standards and practices lawsuit waiting to waiting to happen. So it's funny actually when we were reviewing Arrow once upon a time, character on that, Mr. Terrific, he like whenever he showed up in costume, whenever he had like his superhero outfit on, he always had his hair like sort of braided and sort of not quite. I mean, I guess it was cornrows. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at his head again. But no, typically when he was walking around, he had more of a sort of like afro kind of thing, right? And I remember there was a scene in that show where it was like, okay, we have to gear up. Like this thing's going down in like 30 minutes, and it cut to them at the scene before 30 minutes later, and his entire head, as per usual, was in these like cornrows or whatever, and we were like, is this feasible that he did this to his hair and then got across town in 30 minutes? And we actually Googled, how long does it take to do this to your hair? And I was like, this feels like at least a few hours of work. And sure enough, it really stuck out. I was like, this is ridiculous. Has he got super speed? He doesn't, for the record. I know we're talking about superheroes, but Mr. Terrific does not. He does have fancy tech spheres, though. Maybe spheres. He has fancy tech spheres. Maybe he's got some spheres that use some lasers or something to
braid his hair.
That's what he focused on. It's just like, okay, we have to stop bad guys, have to like hold up like things like bridges in case school buses fall into the ocean, and also super fast hair braiding.
I've always thought about that with Batman because when he puts on his helmet, around his eyes has to have black makeup.
Yeah,
so I'm always like, they never show Batman putting the black makeup around his eyes.
They don't. Although
It's just magically there.
credit, because the trailer for the new one showed, for the first time ever, there's shots of Pattinson in the new trailer for the new one,
Hmm.
where he's got the cowl off, but he's still got the eye makeup around his eyes,
Oh.
and you never see like it magically disappears. In every other Batman movie we've ever
Hmm.
had, it always magically disappears whenever he's got the cowl off. But even though he's clearly wearing some black makeup around his eyes to
Hmm.
make his eyes just sink into the mask, but whatever. So, yeah, no, the scene's super. Ugh. The whole thing's very.
Hmm.
Ugh.
Hmm.
It's funny actually because I had to watch this and another movie we're recording today as well, and I wanted to have some popcorn, and I thought to myself I actually watched this one second because I figured that this one was more likely to make me not want to eat because I just
Hmm.
suspected there'd be a lot of hair stuff that was probably going to be disgusting. So I think I made the right choice. I just want to
Hmm.
make that clear. It wasn't constant, but I made the right choice anyway. So there you go. So some other character stuff we should mention is that Anna has been seeing one of the presenters, like the main guy
Hmm.
presenter, who has actually been working there less than she has, and he started off as a receptionist, but has risen through the ranks very quickly. But he effectively dumps her the first time she tries to talk to him in the movie, because he's seen someone else, which later on turns out to be the new boss. And the new boss is very casual about the whole thing and just is happy to just yes, we're having an affair. Yes, leave me
Hmm.
alone. Get out of my office. Um, and this leads to some stuff later. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff in the middle of the movie is like her being promised to do this show. She's working on it, but she's having these moments with her hair where she's like having like nightmares, or she's seeing
Hmm.
like creepy stuff in the reflection, stuff like that. Um, you're kind of waiting for her to be screwed over because she believes she's getting her show. She's all happy and naive about it, and you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And eventually, Vanessa Williams' character is the one who's going to host it, even though it was going to be Anna.
Hmm.
It still says she's going to produce it, so it's not a complete backstabbing, but it's it's in there. It's in the sketchy territory. But where the plot goes later on, we'll come back to some of the other deaths that happen throughout the movie because the hair kind of like just reacts to various people. But where the movie goes for the third act is that it reveals later on in the film that Vanessa Williams' boss character, because she got a weave at the same place, also has the bad hair.
Hmm.
And we get a hair vs hair fight, but it turns out that she's like stronger. She's been feeding on more people because the hair's feeding. You see, so I suppose to get into the legend of the hair, it's basically like old witches hair, but it comes from like a Native
Hmm.
American folklore where it's like natural hair that grows in the forest and or something. Like,
Hmm.
I was trying to follow this the best I could. It was a little bit out there as far as concepts go.
It seemed like it was like natural Native American hair that grows in a forest on a plantation. So I was like, what? Like
Yeah,
it's just.
there was definitely part of it which was the white people who had like stole the land and were now had plantations were
Hmm.
claimed it as their own, like this is ours to use. And that's like there's like a sort of scene at the end that shows that Dawson Leary
Yeah.
is actually like basically harvesting this and selling it
Hmm.
for here. Now, whether or not he knows that he's spreading evil around the world, I'm not even sure. I mean, it's still pretty nasty and disgusting, and the
Hmm.
metaphor is still there for still the exploitation. But uh, yeah, so like that big concept at the end is one of the things that made me go, this is a bit much. Especially when you see like a visual of all this hair coming out of the roots of this tree and it's like wrapped around the woods and or the branches and stuff.
And they could have just taken from real life because the majority of weave hair comes from Asia. And on some accounts, there's some weave hair that comes from India where there's I forget the particular religious sect, but there's a religious sect that the women shave their heads at the temples. And so that hair gets sold
Hmm.
and turned into weave hair. But there's also another part of it where women are selling their hair because they're in such extreme poverty that they have no choice. And that's usually like in Vietnam, Cambodia, like Southeast Asia. So they could have went into why they could have totally done a story about the hair having residual pain from how it was acquired. and they could have linked it to where it actually comes from in Southeast Asia and in Asia, South Asia,
That
and
definitely makes more
instead of making up this other story.
that definitely makes more sense. Like I can see why the movie didn't want to do that because they want to have this. They wanted to link it into the
Hmm.
exploitation of the country and the people. Both black people and Native Americans. They wanted to link thematically into that, which is
Hmm.
why we have this in the movie, which is how it connects to all that. Yeah, it would probably make more sense. Although to be honest, like the appeal of like getting other hair put in your head sounds awful to me anyway. But hearing you
Hmm.
describe some of the people that are like doing it because they're like they need the money, so they're shaving their heads because
Hmm.
they have to. I was like, I can't like. I'd be so freaked out at, like thinking about where the hair came from.
Yeah, I saw
um,
a short video. It was maybe 6 or 7 minutes long on YouTube about this woman in Vietnam that she literally sold her hair so she could feed her children. Like that's a bit. And oh, also there was a time period in South America where women were getting their hair stolen. Like they would go to the movies and just feel somebody cutting their ponytail off and run off with it. Like,
like that's awful. I'm not gonna lie though, it does sound like a really silly crime, and it's making me kind of giggle a little bit. Like
yeah.
I'm just
Well, these weaves, they can cost, like, the hair can cost $600.
the
Like if you have beyond 12 inches of hair, those can easily give bring $300 to $600 on whatever market.
yeah. I would just have like I mean I think it's weird sewing someone else's hair to your hair anyway, but I would feel really guilty thinking about where the hair might have came from. So
Hmm.
yeah, not something that I like. And there's definitely characters in this movie who kind of have that opinion as well, but
Hmm.
they ultimately give in. Is a sad part, and it's kind of like because her one friend who is the most adamant against it for most of the movie eventually gives in.
Hmm.
Okay, so even then it turns out that she also has bad hair,
Hmm.
and it kind of almost becomes like a body snatchers thing where all of this witch hair is like taking over people, and the more it feeds on blood, it eventually these ancient witch spirits will be able to take over the body, and that's what's kind of happening as the movie goes on. Um, so we get to this point in the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie where she's running around the building from her boss, who's now just an evil witch woman with magic long hair that's like super long, and like she's doing the grudge thing where she's up in the ceiling and the hair's everywhere. And like then the other people who have been infected with the bad hair are also coming after her. It almost turns into a hair zombie movie or something like that
Hmm.
at the last 10, 15 minutes. And then the solution to it ultimately turns out to be to just get the hair wet because you can't get a hair weave wet. And
Hmm.
it never really made sense to me why this would also destroy. Like, because okay, I get that damages and would ruin actual hair weave, but this is supernatural hair. So
Hmm.
why does the water? I mean, I guess water destroying witches is kind of a classic trope, I suppose. But
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. That I
yeah,
connected it to the Wicked Witch of the West and how she was defeated by water.
yeah. I guess this is part of the tone being kind of up and down. Like, see if the
Hmm.
tone that was as comedic as it felt like it probably should have been during the hair horror
Hmm.
scenes. I think the solution being just get it wet would have been kind of cute and kind of funny. As it was though, when it got to that point, I was like, "Oh, is this easy? Just get the sprinklers going."
Hmm.
Which, by the way, I don't. I can't remember where I heard this, but sprinkler systems in buildings, like when a sprinkler sensor like detects something like a fire or whatever, it
Hmm.
only sets off the sprinkler that detects it. It doesn't set off them all. That's like a movie
Hmm.
myth. So
Oh, I didn't know
so
that.
every single scene in the movie where one sprinkler like gets a flame and then like every sprinkler turns on,
Hmm.
bullshit.
That's like the air vent crawling. Like in movies, they have
Yeah,
people crawl
yeah,
through air vents, but they're only meant to carry air. So when you put a human body in it, they'll fall right open because they're not designed to have the weight of a human in them.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I don't really roll with it because it's a movie, and I'm not really complaining that much. But it
Hmm.
stuck out to me in this case in particular because normally it's not like a big plot point. Like sometimes it'll be for like a dramatic visual because they want all the water on to have the big indie movie moment where someone's in the sprinklers and they're cleansing
Hmm.
themselves or something stupid like that, and it's whatever. But this was like how she defeats the boss who's on the other side because she's in like a sound booth and like the
Hmm.
evil boss lady's on the other side of the glass and but the water kills all. Anyway, so that's kind of how the story wraps up, and then she cuts her hair while it's all wet, and then that seemingly fixes the issue, and she moves back in with her auntie and uncle and accepts that she should be who she is. But there's kind of like a little twist, well, not a twist, but like there's a moment at the end where her cousin's like, you know what, I'm sick of using that stuff to straighten my hair. I'm going to just go and get a weave like you did. And she's like, dun dun dun. Um, Not that we're done, because I've skipped over all of the actual murder scenes with the hair, because some of them are, worth mentioning, worth talking about. We mentioned the landlord, which actually my second big laugh of the movie was how she disposes of his body after the hair kills him. Luckily, her window in her apartment is right above where the dumpster is in the alleyway, so she just tosses him out the window, and he lands in the dumpster. This was a good. This was a good visual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I got a kick out of it. We also have the ex-boyfriend, which happens whilst they're having sex, because he has a fight with the boss lady and then comes crawling back to her, and she's, I don't know, she's that lacking in self-respect, and she's just feeling lonely enough that she sort of goes back to his place. Things are getting weird. They never quite mentioned. They tease something early on, like because he threatens to leak out to the the office something that she likes, something that she'd be embarrassed by in sex, and it never actually says what it is. Like, we see that he's got a drawer full of kinky sex toys, but she only takes out the blindfold. But that's less for her and more for him. So I don't think it ever quite answered what her weird kink was.
Yeah, it didn't.
And it's not a big deal. But movie, if you're going to tease me with a question like that, answer it. I want to know, what was it? What weird thing does she like? Because he specifically says, the thing that little thing I did for you that you like, or whatever. It was something like that. So I don't know. Theorize in the comments, people.
I very much like that they set this in 1989.
Sure.
Because I really got a kick out of the outfits, the music. They nailed that 1989 like New Jack Swing style music, and the only thing that they kind of didn't get quite right was the dancing. It's like you could tell these were younger people. I mean, obviously the people are supposed to be in their 20s, and the people that had dancing in their, but people who are currently in their 20s are either older Gen Z or younger millennials, and they wouldn't dance the same way as adults in the 80s. So you could tell they tried to teach them how to dance that way, but it didn't come out quite right. It would be like me trying to dance like a 1970s person on Soul Train. Like, I can kind of mimic it, but I don't think I would be able to nail it.
I mean, I can't dance at all, really. Never mind mimicking eras gone by. But no, you're right. I mean, as previously mentioned, this was the year that I was released into the world. So naturally, all the people in this movie are either, younger than me or about my age, or a couple of key characters notwithstanding. I'm pretty sure Dawson is a fair bit older.
Oh, I'm sure he's got to be at least 40 now.
Oh yeah, he's in his mid-40s by now, for sure. He may even be pushing 50 at this point, to be honest. But Dawson's Creek was a while ago.
Yeah.
It's been some time. So yeah, her hair kind of grows and kills the boyfriend. Although she actually stabs him. She kind of like, the hair doesn't actually finish the job. She kind of like gets entranced, like her eyes change a different color, and she stabs him, and it's like it's an okay moment. That was kind of the last one that was interesting from a death perspective, though. Like, everything after that point, it kind of felt like, the big CG hair grabs him from behind, or when Lena Waithe gets grabbed, it's like the hair like comes and grabs her face. And this is sort of towards the end when they're all sort of in the office building, kind of sneaking around.
I kind of like that scene, but mostly because of how Lena Waithe played it. Like, her personality brought something to that scene.
Yeah, she's definitely got the. I won't quite say meta, but she does drop some horror movie references. She does kind of like comment in a critical way about the things that are going on. She's got that kind of meta sense of humor, which. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to have a character like that. It almost felt, like I say, it almost felt weird how little of her we actually saw. Because when she was like dropping Friday the 13th references and saying, I've seen enough Jason movies to know to get the hell out of here or stay away from whatever, it kind of felt like, if this was consistent throughout the movie, this would be fine. But it feels like because there's been so little of her, it almost feels weird having this like referential humor suddenly thrust upon us kind of thing. So yeah, and some tone consistency there might have been nice. Uh, but I yeah, I think because I think the problem for me is once it gets to like all the kills after the first couple, is that it tends to be long CG hair, grabs someone or just sort of digs into someone. And there's a couple of like there's some nice little teasy moments with the hair early on where it's like it'll just prick her finger, or it'll like go into your foot a little bit, or just these little disgusting little detaily things that. And that stuff was way creepier because it was really specific and it was like a practical thing and whatever. But once it's just, like it doesn't even matter that it's hair at a certain point. It could be just, fog or black smoke or anything. It could be any CG effect.
That reminded me, there was one gross out scene. We're in the spoiler section, right?
Yeah, we're spoilers, yeah.
The scene where the hair, the hair fiends for blood.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a time period during the month when she started bleeding and the hair ate that blood. And I was like, okay, now that's some Japanese stuff right there. That's some stuff that would happen in a Japanese horror movie.
I like how you phrased that, the time period of the month.
Yes.
No, yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I think I'd forgotten about it, despite the fact that it was probably one of the most memorable, funny scenes in the movie because it is just outrageously silly that, like, she's got a cramp and then her hair just kind of grows and goes into her pants, and she's just kind of like, what the hell was happening? And then it comes out after it's finished, and she's like, that was effed up. It was like it was a really genuine kind of like, yeah, that was really weird and stupid and like nonsensical. Like that was mad. Yeah, more of that humor. More of this. More of this humor. I think would have, like, if that had been more consistently there in the back third of the movie. I think that the horror stuff being a little bit less slick in its direction, a little less slick in its editing, because there's definitely a couple of moments where it felt like it was cutting things up a bit too much and a bit too choppy, and it kind of felt like maybe it was because it was trying to minimize the CG shots, but it did feel very stilted versus what I thought was a really confidently directed film for the vast majority, where it was all the normal scenes and all the little moments of like absurdity or the little moments of tension or feeling her hair itch or be sewed or the little details it was good at. Once it went big and bombastic, it still lost its charm, and it wasn't there anymore, sadly. So yeah. Is there anything we've glossed over that you would like to bring up?
Let me check my notes. I talked about. Oh yeah, we did talk about the cameos. We forgot to mention Jay Farrow from Saturday Night Live. He was one of the people in the background. Michelle Hurd, Laverne Cox was the hairstylist, and Laverne Cox, people know her mostly from Orange Is the New Black.
Ah, okay.
We talked about the aunt and uncle.
Yeah, I have to admit I didn't know any of those names you just mentioned, but I'm glad you're here to bring it up for all the audience who are screaming at us, going, "Mention these people that we like," or whatever. So, no.
There's going to be a commenter. You forgot to mention so and so.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can definitely get the sense that this is a movie created by a core group of people who have a lot of friends in the industry who all were there to sort of show up for a scene or two. Yeah, so. Which is nice, and I think, like, I would say it's better, probably much better than what I would say the typical straight to VOD movie for for Hulu or Netflix or whatever is, because it did feel like a movie, it looked like a movie, it felt like it had a really specific tone. It's just a shame that the actual horror stuff kind of lets it down in the back half, and does sort of put it more into the just okay territory versus. Because for the first like half hour, I was like, this could be great. I'm kind of into this build. I was really enjoying the characters. I was enjoying how it was setting things up, and then sadly, then it just becomes a big. I was just really bored in that last half hour. Like I was out of it at that point. The story lost me along the way, which is a shame, but it happens. So, all right. Would you like to rate Bad Hair out of 10?
I'm going to give it a 5.5. because I enjoy the story. I enjoy the time period that it took place, but I had to knock a lot of points off for the bad CGI and for the funny parts not quite being funny enough and the scary parts not being scary enough.
Yeah, yeah. You don't really get the best of either world, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm going to go a smidge higher. I'm going to say 6 out of 10. I
Mhm.
think I would still say it's worth checking out. And some people might connect to it if you're maybe not as avert to the overt
Mhm.
adverse,
Yeah.
whatever word I'm looking for. If you're not as sensitive to like big CG stuff coming to get you like I am,
Mhm.
where I'm just sick of it and just I'm bored by it. But I think there's a lot to like here in terms of how it's made, in terms of a lot of the elements, like the characters, the casting,
Mhm.
the direction, for the most part, uh, is really strong. So I was still, I mean, I'd recommend this more than most direct to streaming movies for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for me. But sadly, I was hoping for more than that. I really thought
Mhm.
I thought the trailer was good, and I thought the movie started really strong, and then it kind of dipped, and that's always a shame when that happens. It's like it's almost more painful when a movie that had
Yeah.
potential to be great just
I just
ends up being
wish
okay.
I wish he would have got a really good practical effects coordinator because there's so many creepy things you could do with hair, and
Yeah.
the CGI just takes all the bite out of it.
It didn't need to be like because they go with this thing where the hair gets so long that it has to be CGI because it's this big
Mhm.
monstrous thing. I'm like, nah, just make it simple. Make it
Mhm.
like it actually would almost be more interesting if it never got longer, if it was just the length it always was, because that would introduce this side. You could almost have some comedy of the idea of the hair like going to like kill someone, but
Mhm.
she doesn't realize and she walks away before it can reach. And
Yeah.
just you could do stuff like that, and that could be kind of fun. Or there's potential there, you know. But hey, uh, there you go. That's bad hair.
Mhm.
That's the movie film. Uh, so by all means, let us know what you think of bad hair. Not bad hair in general, not the concept of bad hair. Just the movie Bad Hair. Let us know what you think of that
Mhm.
in the comments below. Like and subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All of these things help us out a lot on YouTube. You can, of course, support us over in patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I'll thank our Patreon producers at this time. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. That is why the higher tiers, of course, is to get a producer credit, but you can support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses. For example, an exclusive extra episode once a month. You can get that either being a patron or being a paid YouTube member. Either way works, but there's also more goodies over at Patreon at the higher tiers. So go and have a look, see if you're interested, and see if you want to help support everything that we do here. Also, catch us on Twitter at Screams Midnight for the General Mail Fuzz Movies Twitter for all things Sacred Hockey Mask, Screams After Midnight, and Atomic Cinema Experiment. Sasha, would you like to pimp out
Oh,
your
definitely.
channel?
Come check me out at What Did I Just Watch? And the last week I just did Mirror Monsters to celebrate the release of Candyman, and I reviewed a bunch of other movie monsters that come out of the mirrors.
Such as Mirror.
Uh, like I did Mirror Mirror already
Okay.
a year ago, but this past week I did Candisha, Kuntalanak. Well, I should say Candisha is a French film. Kuntalanak is an Indonesian film. I did Into the Mirror, which is a South Korean
I've
film.
seen that one.
Yeah, and I did the remake of Mirrors as well. And
Uh,
also Queen of Spades. I did the Queen of Spades and Dark Right and Queen of Spades through the Looking Glass, which are both Russian movies.
those are some deep. I mean, I've seen Into the Mirror, and
Hmm.
I think I saw part of the remake, but okay, I tapped out like 20 minutes in because it was terrible.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, it was. The Queen of Spades remake, just skip it.
but those are some deep pulls, which is impressive, quite frankly. It's
Hmm.
impressive. You went digging. Is like, okay, there must be more mirror horror movies, and you
Oh
found
yeah.
them. You went around the globe and you found them.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's cool. So there's always a link in the description of these episodes to Shasha's channel, so go and have a look. But that's us. That is the show. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and if you see someone wearing the sacred mask. Repeat to yourself, hockey season ended months ago.